Hello, everybody. My name is Paul B.J. Ransbury. I am the CEO of Aviation Performance Solutions. And it's just a great honor and pleasure to be back here on our LinkedIn live stream. And we have such a wonderful presentation ready for you today. And it's called The Dangerous Climate for Loss of Control in Flight. And we have Captains Clark McNeese and Dave Carbaugh here with us. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to bring everybody online. We have Clark McNeese here. I'll introduce first, then he'll introduce Dave. Captain McNeese is our VP Flight Operations and Standards, longtime expert in upset prevention and recovery training from the military as a former military fighter pilot, spent 10 years at the airlines as a captain on the 737. And Otter, over to you to introduce our very special guest today.
Well, thanks, BJ. It's great to be here on this venue again and just sharing some of our thoughts for everybody to consider. And I am definitely honored to have, once again, Captain Dave Carbaugh with us. I call him Captain Dave. Not only has he been a great friend, but he's a true professional, subject matter expert, and mentor of mine as well. He has comes from decades of experience there in this area. He is definitely an appropriate person for us to have this discussion based on his long time experience. He's got about 12,000 hours. Let's see, U.S. Air Force Academy graduate in engineering. Has got his master's in human factors. He was an Air Force T-37, T-38, F-5, F-15 instructor pilot. Also was a check airman on the C-141 there, and then joined Boeing back in 1987 until he retired recently, and just went through a lot of work there, topping off as chief pilot of flight operations safety for the Boeing and test evaluation departments there. He's one interesting thing, and I was hoping he could share real quickly. He served on the National Nuclear Accrediting Board there, and also is an instructor at the University of Southern California there for safety. Hey, Dave, tell us about that Nuclear Accrediting Board work you did, if you don't mind, just quickly.
Yeah, the Otter, good to be here. The different organizations that I work and the boards that I chaired and co-chaired were very exciting and varied from wake turbulence to, but my probably the one I enjoyed the most was the upset recovery training aid and putting that together, and that's still following me along since we did it back in the 90s. So it's good to still be here.
Great. Well, we were going to talk, and we're going to kind of present this more of a discussion. I definitely think the audience is going to be eager to hear some of your thoughts there in this unique time that we are in. And I'll say, of course, challenging time in certainly more ways than one. As probably most people here in the audience are aware, we specialize in loss of control in flight mitigation, the #1 causal factor of fatalities in aviation. And this is where we really spend our time and energy in trying to help pilots bring everyone home safely there. And you've been part of our team in crushing this loss of control in flight threat here. And so I just thought we would share some of the thoughts there about this unique time that we're in. Let's go now to the next slide. I would like quickly to remind everyone of the 3 categories of loss of control in flight. And they are environmentally induced, such as, wake turbulence, clear air turbulence, wind shear, mountain wave, icing, thunderstorms, and all. Then you have the systems anomalies induced reasons, for loss of control of flight, and that would be flight instrument type failures, autopilot malfunctions, and flight control issues. And then the third one is the pilot-induced category, such as not paying attention, distraction in the cockpit, disorientation, poor cross-check, poor pilot technique, such as transitioning from one airplane type to another, or incapacitation. And of course, here's one that a lot of guys don't think about either, and that's mismanagement of the automation. That has led, it's not the autopilot failure, but it was the mismanagement of the autopilot that actually led to the upset or loss of control in flight there. So what we were going to do here in the rest of this seminar is talk about how some issues can affect pilot resiliency and competency in each of these above areas that I just mentioned. It seems there are some certain voices out there, even in the media, that's actually asking the question, hey, through this COVID, this pandemic, where business is not normal, operations are shutting down, people are going home, staying home, not being able to be proficient, how is that going to affect us as we go forward? I thought I would play a video here first. That actually comes from Channel 10, Tampa Bay article of November 2021, just a few months ago, and it was titled "Out of Practice Pilots Reported Making Mistakes as They Return to the Cockpit." And all I did was, it was about a 5-minute video they put on the news, but I took about a minute and a half excerpt out of it. So BJ, if you don't mind, let's play that video.
We searched through the Aviation Safety Reporting System database, a monitoring program funded by the FAA that allows aviation workers, from mechanics to air traffic controllers, flight attendants, and pilots, to voluntarily and confidentially report mistakes and alert the government to potential safety issues. Lack of flying, or COVID, or pandemic. A quick search between January 2020 to October 21. Within seconds, 1,035 reports. Inside all this data, we counted 206, pointing to pilots out of practice.
Second flight in over 7 months due to COVID.
Reporting rustiness.
I know I felt a bit rusty and tired.
Proficiency problems, mistakes due to lack of flying.
There were many errors.
In those 206, we found problems like this one. 2 pilots taking off from St. Pete Clearwater Airport. Thunderstorms in the area. Both pilots state they had not flown in over 2 months. And the mistake? Overshooting their altitude, which our expert says could have created a conflict with other planes in the sky.
The biggest problem is when you're not into the mode where you're accustomed to doing everything on a day-to-day basis. The distraction takes you out of that picture, and then you can miss the little thing. And the little thing might become bigger.
Is there a fix?
The orchestra is getting tuned up.
We found airlines do have their own rules to help pilots get back that rhythm, like time in simulators. The FAA also has standards to address pilot proficiency that include 3 landings every 90 days. Amid the pandemic, those were eased as planes sat idle and airlines felt deep cuts.
Dave, why don't you just share some initial thoughts about that video with us? Would you mind doing that?
Yeah, the situation is very interesting in that when you take a look at data like that, the reports that are out, it's only the tip of the iceberg. From a human factors point of view, we know that pilots returning from having not flown for a while, or fairly inexperienced pilots, make lots of little mistakes. And when those little mistakes kind of gang up all together, that's where you end up having incidents and accidents. So when we see these reports, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg out there. there are a lot of other things going on out there that are happening because of the fact that pilots have been out of, like the man said in the video, out of that rhythm.
Yeah, and these reports are largely self-generated. There, it's almost in a sense an honor system. Most of us professional pilots are aware of being able to fill out NASA reports and things, and I know just about every professional is perfectly willing to do that. But like you said, it's safe to say that this is not everything by any means. There's a lot more going underneath the surface there than we can actually see on these reports. Let's go to this next slide, because the ASAR's reports was kind of interesting. I will just briefly talk about this, and BJ might jump in on this, but what we did was we looked at certain filters for the reports, and there are three key terms that got filtered. There you can see it on the slide: controlled flight into or toward terrain, also loss of aircraft control, or unstabilized approach. Just looking at those, if you look at the time period prior to COVID, in this case was a 1 year period from March 2019 to February 2020, you can see that there was about, in terms of percentage, is only 0.8% of all operations that reported something or an issue or an incident related to these here. Now, if you looked at the next year from March 20 to February 21, in the heat of COVID, operations dropped over 40%. All right, flight operations dropped over 40%. You can see that there in the first column, and then all the way to the right, that second column, what we see is almost 5% of the reports included this type of verbiage in the report. So that is about a 500% change or increase in incidences, reported incidences, that is, on the ASARs.
Yeah, Otter, I think one of the important things to realize from this is how it's affecting the pilots. But there are a lot of other players in the system: air traffic control, maintenance, dispatch, etc., that are suffering from similar lack of rhythm, and they're making mistakes and doing things, the little errors that crop up too. So pilots aren't the only ones suffering because of this.
Yeah, and that's a great thought. Let's go to the next slide and bullet. We were basically going to mention, BJ, do you want to jump in on that?
I was just going to say that we're going to, with our support team there, we're going to put a link into the chat stream. If folks want to watch this entire presentation from last year, which was done at the Bombardier Safety Stand Down that includes the slide, you should be able to see that link. I put it in Facebook and YouTube. We're going to have our team put it into LinkedIn. You can go have a look at it. And interestingly, what we're going to do here as we get into February of 2022, we're going to pull the data from the same period. So we'll have 19 through 20, 20 through 21, then 21 through 20. And when we do that, we'll post it into this particular, because this is a LinkedIn live session, we'll post it into the comment stream so folks can take a look at that. That was it, Otter. I thought you did a great job presenting that. So go on to the next slide.
All right. So next bullet, yeah, pilots returning after the COVID leave of absence, and that's kind of what we've alluded to at this point, is pilots sitting around for a while there before they're able to get back into the cockpit or get back into some type of even training there. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, you've got the more senior people who either took early retirement, etc. Or they took these leave of absence, and now they're returning, and they've kind of been out of the cockpit for a while, and so there's a certain amount of training that needs to be done before they're kicked back. But when you really look at worldwide operations, that training can be highly variable. In other words, you have your expert trainers and do the right thing and focus on the right thing. There's others that just don't have the resources to do that for pilots when you consider a worldwide situation. And, it's not only leave of absence for the captains, but some of the first officers took some leave of absence too. So you could have a formula for having guys that have been out of the cockpit flying together.
I agree. I remember, I don't think I was late, I think longest vacation I took when I was at the airlines was, I think 3 weeks. And I remember coming back after 3 weeks, thinking, whoa, I'm definitely rusty, shall we say. And also I can't imagine being laid off for months, many months. In fact, like some of the guys have.
Yeah. From a human factor standpoint, it affects the inexperienced people the most. In other words, the very experienced people, they could probably handle a leave of absence a while, but if you're fairly new to the airplane or fairly inexperienced type pilot, these leave of absence are going to affect you a lot more.
Great point. Let's go to the next bullet. Another issue that seems to be brewing in the industry, of course, are the upgrades that pilots are taking now as a result of pilots, say, spilling out the top, like you said, these early retirements. And of course, everybody on the seniority list is moving up and moving into new seats, new aircraft there. So inexperience in those seats are certainly going to be highlighted.
Yeah, I think that's a big point. In fact, I know some of the majors are having their brand new pilots come in, and they go right to wide body, long range flying, and so things are happening much quicker than they used to, and so you have that experience gap that just adds another element of potential hazard.
And I know a lot of the Western airlines have some good protocols in place for their company, that if they have a new captain, for instance, that they're going to ensure that he flies with a relatively senior first officer there. But probably not all airlines follow that protocol necessarily. Is that true?
Yeah, Western airlines follow that protocol, but it varies a lot when you look at worldwide operations. Some folks just don't have the manpower to make that happen. They need everybody on board, so you get those situations where you have fairly inexperienced people flying together.
Great. Let's go to the next bullet. There are new aviation businesses that are actually taking advantage of some of this change in the industry. There are businesses that have gone, aviation businesses that have gone out of business. They weren't able to survive, and now people are coming in to fill gaps there. And of course, this can lead to, once again, inexperience in these various areas, whether it's flying, whether it's maintenance, certainly supply, supply chain, things like that. There are a lot of potentially new operators with no track record and limited operational experience.
It's when you take the whole world into account, you've got a tremendous increase in new business and new entries into the market. And all those are starting from the ground up, and there's often an accelerated pace for that startup that ends up having fairly inexperienced people, not only from the pilots, but the flight attendants and the maintenance people and the operations people, de-ice people, all that. So it's kind of a perfect storm.
Yeah. BJ.
Yeah, I was only going to mention that, I think it's great to contrast this, for example, with a very progressive company, for example, like Delta Airlines, like we talked about before our meeting today, that is, an APS partner that has robust upset prevention and recovery training, is they take this very seriously. They recognize there's a big deficiency, bringing people back, very robust training, getting them back into the inventory. And, organizations that are still getting pressured from the financial side, and somehow that's forcing their safety hand to maybe be not as stringent as it was before, or perhaps to Dave's point, the new organizations now starting up, not truly understanding the impact that this pandemic has had on proficiency and competency across the board, just not pilots, but maintenance, flight operations, dispatch, and everything. And so, I think the progressive organizations are doing, a great job in this. But it's really important that they don't represent the majority of the activities in the industry when you look at it from a global perspective.
That's right, and that's an important point, BJ, because you contrast that with third world type operator who's just lucky to get a MPL, or a guy with 200 hours just to fill the seat because they need them.
I agree. Tremendous stress on the training part of the organization itself. I'm reflecting on my brother, who's been at a major airline here in the States for 20 plus years, and he's a check airman there, and he was off for numerous months and then called back in, and the struggles that they are having to pump these pilots through to get them spooled back up is a tremendous strain on the system. There was a recent A321 Airbus Neo that had an interesting incident here. Very lucky in the outcome. Do you remember that? The Surijawa Airlines?
Yeah. Probably the most recent large aircraft loss of control accident is 737 in Surijawa. And this airplane got put into storage during the pandemic with a known auto throttle issue. And of course, when the airline spun up again to start flying, they pulled this airplane out of storage. It still had this auto throttle issue. And so there was a requirement for operations and maintenance and everything to understand the issue, and for us who involved in loss of control, that's the split auto throttles, which was the problem, has been a cause of accidents in China and Russia, and I know a few others, where the crews are faced with this split auto throttle situation on a level off or climb out, and they fail to handle it, because now you have a problem caused by rushing into service, maintenance not quite ready to take care of everything, and pilots that are not fully up to speed either. And that's just a dangerous combination. And that's essentially what happened in Surijawa, because these pilots, they leveled off at an immediate altitude in the climb, and then when they started to climb again, only one throttle went up, the other one stayed back. And in that case, the autopilot is trying to correct. So you got a lot, let's say, left aileron the autopilot is trying to hold it. Well, as soon as you click off the autopilot, if you're not aggressively trying to even increase that or unload, the airplane's going to snap roll in the other direction, and that's essentially what happened.
So basically, yeah, the airplane, due to that systems anomaly, the airplane ended up in an upset,
Right.
and the crew was unable to recover the airplane.
Yep. Yeah, the Russian Neo was they got inadequately de-iced. So even though it's a envelope protected airplane, it's based on the AOA indicators. So if the wing is not representative of a clean wing, then it's going to stall earlier than what the AOA indicators do. And so this A321 Neo ended up stalling, and it was like 40 degrees nose high and 20 degrees nose low, and a lot of bank to one side and more than 90 in the other. So, it was definitely a stall event. The pilots were fortunate enough to recover, but it goes to show that you got to have basic pilot skills in addition to envelope protection are really important.
Yeah, it's my understanding on that particular incident you're talking about there, with the de-icing, the crew that de-iced the airplane was new, and they didn't properly de-ice the airplane there. And then of course, that led to all of the water getting in pitot tubes, things like that, and it dropped the flight. I think the ADRs all shut down, and so it lost all its flight envelope protections there. And like you said, it went into the stall, very substantial stall condition for a while before they were able to recognize and get it recovered.
Yeah, and we had a A320 during an acceptance flight, had the AOE indicators get frozen basically because there's water in them, and they had a similar issue when they were trying to test the envelope protection, that they stalled the airplane. So you got to be able to recover from the stall.
Yeah. Let's go to the next bullet. It just kind of refers to the pilot shortages that we know we're experiencing. And of course, that is resulting in less experienced pilots entering the workforce. I know it's not just pilots, it's industry wide in all areas, like maintenance or dispatchers and all, because I know the majors are hiring some of the least experienced maintainers they've ever hired traditionally in the past. We've seen that in our area here too.
Yeah, the supply chain, the majors can usually get the pilots that they want, even though they're not as experienced as they would like. But that supply chain problem works all the way down into business aircraft and commuters and those type of things. And they start taking on some pretty inexperienced people because they have to. And the other issue that's kind of important is there's only a finite amount of military pilots that are available that get out and want to go work for the airlines and stuff. So that valuable experience is far few between, and it's changed. So nowadays, most of the pilots come from a civilian background. And that really highlights, Otter, why the airlines like military pilots, and it's because of the quality of training. In the military, everybody goes through training and gets about 200 hours of flight time, and they go right to transport. So there's not a 1,500 hour or any other kind of requirement. Those guys are out there flying airplanes with 200, 250 hours as a routine basis, and they do it quite safely. And the reason they do that, they can do that, is because they get quality training, to include all out attitude training.
Yeah, there definitely are some unique things about military aviation training in fixed wing. Well, specifically, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and all that provide an additional skill set and awareness there that does tend to help them be able to maybe mitigate this loss of control in flight threat a little better. We know that the military is still learning a good bit. They are behind a little bit in where the industry at large has decided, such as UPRT. They don't call it UPRT in the military there's not necessarily a focused area in that type of training, but some of the stuff that they traditionally do is transferable, and it does help pilots. And you're right, we are getting less military pilots in the cockpit in the airlines. Wanted to talk just briefly about some of the counter strategies here that can go on there. As this bullet says, we can effectively counter this threat with quality, intentional training that includes UPRT. What's your initial thoughts on that comment right there, Dave?
Yeah, we already talked about how guys need to get back into training, and training is an important factor in coming back into operations after an absence, or for new guys to come on to be able to handle this thing, quality training. And for the loss of control threat, the solution is upset and prevention and recovery training. And that needs to be an essential part of any operation or back to flying type of training that occurs.
Yeah, and as BJ said, there are a number of progressive organizations such as Delta, one of our partners. They truly feel, we've talked to them, they truly feel they are going above and beyond what's being required of them from the FAA to ensure their pilots are prepared as they come back online. And Delta has a very robust UPRT program as well. So it is neat to see that there are leaders in the industry that are recognizing this additional threat and trying to do something about it.
And I'll just add, Otter, that you and I were just at Atlanta not too long ago, and it's exciting to see these progressive operators. Despite the cuts, despite the layoffs, despite the lower activities, Delta Airlines kept their UPRT program full up and robust throughout that entire period because they identified it as a critical area of mitigating the risk. And I think that that's a bold statement. Not everybody followed their lead, but we know that Delta, for example, is a leader, and as we're talking about here, they probably should be following that lead. And so very proud and excited and honored to be, part of that team with that organization is just one example.
Yeah. Let me just say this too, that we might have pilots on the audience here that are thinking, well, wait a minute. Okay, if I'm laid off for 6 months, doing UPRT is not necessarily what I need. I need refresher on how to manage my FMS, or certain other details about the airplane, but not UPRT. But what I would say personally is, what UPRT addresses are those foundational skill sets in manual handling and manual flight operations, because that's what it's all about. When we button push, it's all about flight path management of the aircraft. If we do not manage the flight path of the airplane safely, then that's what, of course, leads to fatalities. And UPRT addresses those core skill sets while we are doing these other tasks in the cockpit.
Yeah, and it's known that if you're doing UPRT training, you're going to get an improvement in basic handling skills as part of it. And so that is what people are lacking when they've been out of the cockpit for a while.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Otter, is that a lot of people think of upset prevention and recovery training is the recovery part, right? An airline pilot or any pilot may never actually use the recovery skill, but the fact that they understand it, they have a skill set, they can deal with it should it arise. The real value of upset prevention recovery training is increased awareness, flight envelope awareness, understanding the environment they're operating in, prevention, seeing situations developing early, understanding that chain of events, that judgment chain, that error chain, and intercepting it early. Is that, upset prevention and recovery training is something that pilots use every single day on every flight. And it just increases their ability, not only from a manual flight operation proficiency standpoint, but as we talked about, an awareness and understanding of what's going on. I mean, we see that in the cadets, after they go through a robust UPRT program, go back and the re-rides dropped almost zero. They better understand what's going on. They have more confidence, correctly placed confidence, and they just are all around a better pilot, once they have UPRT.
And frankly, ICAO, FAA, EASA, numerous industry stakeholders have agreed in recent years that UPRT is a foundational core requirement for all pilots that needs to be achieved early in their careers. Let's go to the next bullet there, because let's just assume for a minute that UPRT is one of the training areas that we need to hit as we spool back up in the industry. There's something that we have definitely learned and we see is not just any UPRT program is adequate. There, you've got to have a certain type of program. We've actually quantified it, and we call it our Every Pilot in Control Solution Standard, or EPIC S2. And I thought I'd just remind you, we've got additional videos about what this EPIC S2 is if you're interested. But just a quick reminder is there are 6 critical features that every UPRT program should have. One, you should have elite qualified instructor pilots in this area. You can't just have any instructor teach the UPRT. You need an integrated program. You need appropriate academics along with practical training, whether it's on aircraft and simulator or both. You've got to have a certain amount of training intensity as well. You can't just have one flight occasionally every few weeks or months or whatever, but it does need to come in a concentrated, focused way. You need the best practices as this UPRT is being taught. You don't want anybody just dreaming up the best way to teach upsets. There, you need a purpose-built platform too. We can't do comprehensive upset training, especially on aircraft training, in a normal category airplane. It's just not. You can do a certain amount, but not comprehensive. And then, of course, you've got to have that initial training, and it needs to be there needs to be recurrent training, because these skills are perishable there.
And we just added that link for EPIC S2 for anybody into the chat stream. We have YouTube, Facebook has it. Our team's going to be putting into LinkedIn, and it's really interesting to look at, because to Otter's point, while the industry is progressing to implement upset prevention and recovery training, it's largely beyond their capability to do effectively. It's an area of training they've never really done robustly before. The good news is there's excellent guidance, is that everybody's taking the right steps in the right direction, but it really is in its infancy. And the reason that this Every Pilot in Control Solution Standard was created is that it takes just more than regulatory guidance. It takes qualified expert instructors that are properly trained. It requires a building block program and an instructor to facilitate that, not just academically, but also on aircraft, whether that's piston and or jet, advanced simulation, non-type specific, type specific. It is really all about the instructor. And the important thing is, this is not just what we've been doing before under a different name. This is an all new approach to approaching this threat. Because if we just do what we've been doing before, that approach to loss of control established it as the #1 threat to air safety for the past 25 years. It's a paradigm shift, and it's not something that can just be done lightly. It really requires an approach to the training that is essentially a new paradigm, as I mentioned earlier. So I won't come back until the Q&A session, Otter, so I'm sorry for inserting myself here.
No, it's a great point. Let's go to the next bullet, and I'll ask Dave for his thoughts on this, because there's, as he knows, we are a big believer in on-aircraft UPRT. That simulator or academic training is simply not sufficient for pilots. What are your thoughts on that, Dave, especially as a former airline captain?
Yeah, the airplane training introduces the dynamic of human factors to the operations. If you haven't been there and you don't have the forces applied to you like you have on a real airplane, or the dynamics involved in a real airplane, you're missing out, and it's hard to convey those things in just academic training and simulator training. So that experiential part of it is really important.
So
And especially for instructors, it's absolutely mandatory.
yeah, great point. And you're kind of referring to the reality factor. I mean, we all know a simulator is simply not the real environment there, but getting in a real airplane to go through this upset training brings that reality factor. Another thing too that a lot of people don't think about, I think, for professional pilots, and that is, frankly, our simulators are not sufficient. Are not sufficient for addressing and teaching all areas of aerodynamics there, because the simulators themselves are limited in their fidelity. They simply don't have the aerodynamic modeling to show all of the critical areas related to upsets. Would you?
You're right, Otter. The simulators have improved over the years, and now they're fairly good in the stall environment. But that's pretty much a 1G type situation in the stall. A lot of times stalls are very dynamic, a lot more going on, and if you don't think a very large airplane can snap roll, you're wrong. If you stall it right, it'll definitely, with some yaw, it'll definitely get your attention rolling, and those kind of things happen out there in the real world. And so that on-aircraft experience, seeing that type of stuff, pays big dividends in that area, because the sim just isn't going to show you that.
Let's go to the next bullet because it's a great point. And I'll just mention that, the UPRT, really a good UPRT program can be delivered in a very short period of time. We've personally got what we consider a comprehensive program that would be a minimum program for any professional pilot, and it includes 4 flights. They're in the real airplane, real aerobatic type aircraft there, and there certainly can be it can be integrated with a simulator session as well. And this can be done over 2.5 to 3 days. A very short period of time, very focused, and it really helps pilots to ingrain the skill sets that allows them to now easily or more easily access those skills in a crisis. And that's really what we see. We would love to be able to offer a 1 or 2 flight UPRT program because it's shorter and more people would probably come. But what we see is with 1 or 2 flights, you do not actually, you can actually degrade your ability to mitigate loss of control in flight with only 1 or 2 flights. We've seen that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Otter. The point is the loss of control incident for a student may happen several years later after their training. But at that point, when it does happen, you have to have an instinctual muscle memory, mental memory of what to do. And if you just have a very quickie program, very minimal stuff, you're probably not going to remember it. And setting up a 3-4 day type of training makes it instinctual by the time you're finished with that, and that'll carry you on until later.
Yeah. Let's go to the next bullet. Some people, I think of upset training as just going out and doing aerobatics. And I think in the past, decades past, that really has been the case. I mean, because frankly, anybody with a commercial license and an aerobatic airplane can hang a shingle and say they teach upset training. And that's what's gone on for years. But in recent years, the industry stakeholders have said, no, 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 no. Aerobatics is not UPRT. We've known this for many years. It is absolutely not sufficient. In fact, certain aerobatic training can lead to negative training and negative transfer of skill training as well. So you really do need pilots to get into a focused UPRT program, not an aerobatic program.
I agree with you, Otter. The thing with aerobatics is it's a precision maneuver. You are making the airplane go where you intend it to go, and you see the airplane as it operates in a loop or a Cuban 8 or whatever. And so you're just making adjustments from where you expect the airplane to go, and you're trying to make it go. Upset recovery is a different animal in that the airplane is someplace where you didn't expect it to go, and your control inputs that have been made up to that point have not been doing the solution that you wanted. So now you have to try something else in order to recover. That's a whole different ball game than aerobatics.
It really is. Like you said, an upset recovery is an unplanned, non-precision maneuver. And we actually have to approach the training of those skill sets differently than strictly aerobatics there. Although I certainly admit certain aerobatic maneuvering, you can teach transferable skills. Absolutely. And we do certain types of aerobatic maneuvers, but it has to be taught in a certain way that's beneficial as opposed to taking away from the needed skill sets. Let's go to the next bullet there. And it probably pretty much just wraps up kind of our overall discussion here, is that UPRT can be and is more focused and more effective at reducing loss control and flight threat. Here, again, our number one threat in the industry, 50%, we still have to realize 50% of all fatalities are coming from the pilots losing control, getting into an upset, and then failing to be able to recover from the upset and ending up a loss control and flight statistic there. Before we go into Q&A, Dave, what any kind of final thoughts there before we jump to questions?
Just in general, Otter, to recap, there's a lot of situations going on right now with people coming back, airlines expanding, the recovery of aviation, etc. Just is a formula for making a lot of little errors, little mistakes as people come back. And the only way you can effectively mitigate that when it comes to loss of control is proper training. And as we just talked about, UPRT focused training is the way to go to prevent loss of control.
Yeah, I'll say, I don't want to give the impression that we're saying UPRT is the only thing pilots need as we spool back up in the industry. Certainly not the case, but it does need to be integrated in their training.
So I'm just inserting myself to ask anybody watching, if you have any questions, please post them into the chat stream, whether that's Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn. And we're going to try to address as many as we can here in the last 10 minutes. Guys, I had an interesting comment when you were talking about awareness of UPRT. Let me see if I can find it here. It was by, just one second here, see if I can find it. It was a great comment. I'm going to show it at the bottom of the screen, by Richard Snake Jackson. UPRT allows a degree of skill to avoid demonstrating outstanding pilot skills, assuming you can demonstrate them, right? So in other words, good decision-making avoids the requirement to demonstrate or need outstanding manual handling skills, right? So I think that was a very astute summary of why awareness and prevention is really an essential part of solutions moving forward.
I think it's a great point. And it was interesting. I just gave a presentation at a safety stand down actually for Textron there, and we had discussions. I had discussions with some of the pilots out there that happened to attend this, And some of their comments were like, well, us more experienced pilots, we don't really need the UPRT. It's really kind of the less experienced ones because they're more easily, say, distracted or fall prey to making some of these mistakes there. But one of the goals, of course, UPRT is to enhance all pilots' awareness and prevention skills. There, it's not just for the new pilot; it's for us old timers as well.
Yeah, the good pilot doesn't need to use his skills to actually recover. He uses his skills to prevent the recovery from having to happen.
Yeah, and that's what a good UPRT program is going to do. It's going to actually build more robust prevention skills there. Although this is something that's kind of not intuitive that we learned here by doing this. And that is, interestingly enough, the pilots who are most skilled at recovery actually are better at prevention. And that may not be intuitive again, but if you think about it, pilots who have been pushed over the edge, they've been pushed over the edge of the envelope multiple times and then been forced to get themselves back into the heart of the envelope over and over again, safely and effectively, they learn, they see the boundaries coming more clearly than someone who has not actually been pushed over the edge.
I agree with you. The pilot that has experience on the edge of the envelope generally can tell when they're getting close. Very inexperienced pilots don't know that they're there. And in fact, when I was talking about those split auto throttle type situations, they didn't happen very quickly. They slowly progressed. And when you looked at the recordings of those accidents, you can see the pilots are sitting there. How come the yoke is on, with the autopilot, how come the yoke is displaced? I mean, they're even talking about it, but they can't tell that they're right there at the edge of the envelope.
Yes, exactly right. And they're great comments, Snake.
All right, here's one that's kind of put you guys in the spot because it's a technical question, but it's one that is very commonly misunderstood. And it's from Tobias on YouTube. He says, considering that AOA is flight path vector versus chord line and G loading is leftover weight, what is the nature of the relationship between AOA, G loading, and airspeed? Boy, if I've ever heard a VG diagram discussion, this is it. But I throw that out to you guys to maybe talk in a little technical relationships of the three critical angles and perhaps VG diagram stuff. Over to you guys.
Dave, you want to talk about it first?
Yeah, angle of attack is what allows the wing to do its thing. So especially when you're talking upset recovery, you've got to reduce the angle of attack to allow the airplane to perform the way it is. It doesn't matter what airspeed you have if you have the AOA in the right place. You're not going to be stalled and the airplane will perform. And as far as being able to perform, we're talking about it's able to maneuver with a less G required. In other words, to make it move. And so they're all interconnected there. And I think that's one of the key steps that we learned in UPRT is the first step in any recovery is to reduce the AOA. And so that to me is the relationship.
Yeah, we see, I think by the nature of the way our flight training industry is, the fact that we don't have angle of attack indicators on airplanes, there are a number of misconceptions that happen to pilots unintentionally there. And it's the way CFIs kind of communicate certain pieces of information that leads to this misunderstanding of relationship between AOA, G load, even attitude. a lot of pilots have kind of this intuitive sense. If the nose is up, then angle of attack is higher. If nose is low, then angle of attack is low, and that's simply not the case. Angle of attack is not a function of attitude, and in fact, angle of attack is not a function of airspeed. But one of the things that seems to resonate so well with the pilots that come through our training, just by the nature of kind of the way we train it in the building block approach, is they get a really good understanding of, listen, for a given airspeed, when G load goes up, that means angle of attack goes up, drag goes up, and stall speed go up. By the same token, when G load goes down for a given airspeed, then AOA, drag, and stall speed goes down. And that what I just said is not immediately intuitive to most pilots, just by the way they're trained, unless they attend a UPRT program. So it's a great question, great comment.
So our good friend, Captain John Cox, says AOA is the difference between where the wing is pointing and where the wing is going, which is a very great way to mention that. So anyway, this is an anonymous user that says, you don't know what you don't know till you attend UPRT. Then you find out there was much that you didn't know. And I think that's very true. And I'm just going to go right over to Nick's comment to close it out here, guys. I think this quote from Louis Pasteur is very apt. So let's just bring that one up for the final thoughts, final discussion from you guys on upset training.
Yeah, chance favors the prepared mind there. That's a great comment there, and one we would fully support, because, you know, frankly, you don't rise to the occasion in a time-critical, life-threatening situation when your heart rate's going this way and your IQ is going this way. You don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training, and that really is what Nick is just bringing up here in my mind.
Yeah, and I'll just finish off by saying that his comment applies not only to commercial type operations, but all the way from GA all the way up. The better you are prepared, it'll follow you through. So those that get trained early in their career and they get experience in UPRT and get recurrent as they progress through the ranks, they'll be better off in the long run.
Yeah, quality UPRT program should be transferable to any fixed wing airplane that you operate. And it's really critical. There is no need for negative training, no need for negative transfer of skill. Modern upset prevention recovery training and, qualified expert providers know that and understand it from A to Z throughout a pilot's career. So 2 things, guys, is that there's a post in there, Otter, to that expanded conversation on critical features of upset prevention recovery training. That's talking about the why of 3 versus 4 flights, or the 2 versus 3 days in upset training, and why that matters. It also talks about how on-aircraft training is really giving people the fundamental capability to get access to their skill set because of what Dave talked about, the human factors that are potentially psychologically and physiologically incapacitating to a crew. So it's more than just knowing what to do and how to do it. You can address that in simulation, but having the discipline to access those skill sets in a crisis comes from on-aircraft training. The last thing is we have a post, everybody. If you haven't had time to put a question to our team here, you can follow that link and submit it, and we'll make sure that we get back to you either in writing or give you a call. So with that, guys, we're now entering our last minute. Very final comments, Otter, then Dave to wrap it up.
No, I just enjoyed being here once again, talking about this. Certainly a passion of mine and live for it. I know Dave does as well. He's very passionate about this.
Yeah, Otter, and I think it kind of shows when we were putting this thing together, we thought we would take 30 minutes on this topic, and here we are, an hour, and we could have kept on going.
Yep. It's great to be with you again, Dave.
Okay, guys, 30 seconds to go. So with that, thank you both very much. Captain Dave, thank you as always. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here as part of the team. So thank you for your astute, insightful, and comments that come from experience. And Otter, thank you for being here. And with that, thank you everybody out there that's been watching. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you in the next section. Take care.